Hi, welcome to Channel Live here at Microsoft Ignite. I'm Pumla Schmidt, and I've got my guest, Carmen Cancoli from the Windows Server and Ecosystem.
Strategy and ecosystem.
Strategy Ecosystem. Sorry, that is a
It's a
mouthful.
mouthful. It's Microsoft Buzzy.
Yes. So, what do you do within that org?
So I actually work with hardware vendors. My specific responsibility is I run the Windows Server Software Defined Program. We just call it WSSD for short because that's a mouthful too.
That sounds like a missile or something.
Right. It is not self-explanatory by any means. So what the WSSD program is Microsoft partners with OEMs to take all of the software-defined technologies that you're hearing about at Ignite, storage spaces direct, software-defined networking, all the Hyper-V security features, and put them together on a hardware offering, configure them, and sell them to a customer in a way that lets them be successful, rather than having the customer have to figure out all of the pieces on their own.
So, this is HCI.
This is HCI.
This is our software-defined storage.
This is our software-defined storage,
data center,
everything.
Let's talk more about this because I'm going to be honest. The first time I heard about this product was about 2 months ago.
Yep.
So I'm thinking there's probably others like me. Like, this is like a hidden gem.
Yeah, you're not the only one. And part of what we're here at Ignite to tell everyone about is the fact that the program exists and why they should be interested in it. And just the fact that Microsoft has an HCI offering. I think one thing that does get overlooked is you called it a product, but it's not really a product, it's a program. The product is Windows Server. All of the technologies that you build an HCI infrastructure on are part of your Windows Server data center license. So virtually every customer here already has everything that they need to be successful with HCI, except for the expertise to get it deployed and the right hardware that will run it in the way that they need to. And that's what WSSD is. WSSD is taking those pieces that are missing from the average IT shop and providing it in a prepackaged way so that a customer can just take off and run instead of have to build an entire new base of knowledge, succeed, fail, the trial and error.
I'm still stuck on the fact that it's utilizing existing Windows Server licenses so that they don't have to go out and buy another license to run WSSD.
That is correct. It is all of the software-defined technologies that we use are in box. There is nothing separately licensed. The hard part, the thing that we noticed customers struggle with over time, and because this has always been true, we've never broken out our software-defined technologies into a different SKU of Windows or an add-on or a download. They've always been part of Windows Server Data Center. But what we noticed customers struggled with was getting it to work successfully on hardware, because for technology that is dependent on high-quality hardware to function properly, right? Like literally everything that you use and deployed in your data center is contained inside those servers. Having the right hardware is critical to being successful. And so that's where the partnership with the OEMs to build these solutions came from.
How is this different from Azure Stack?
They're really kind of targeting different IT modes of operation.
Because isn't Azure Stack hardware as well?
Oh yeah. Azure Stack though is really about Azure consistency, right?
Okay.
When you're examining or putting an Azure Stack into your data center, it's really, we're already fully committed to an Azure way of operating, right? We're already doing things in Azure. We want to keep going that way. We really see the value in operating in the cloud. But there are some things either by regulation or by isolation or by some other need that do not let a customer put all of it into Microsoft's data centers. So they need the ability to keep their Azure development in their site, and Azure Stack helps with that. WSSD is really for the customer who either hasn't moved all the way into a cloud model yet, or they're still in a transition period, but they need to refresh, expiring hardware. Their maintenance costs are too high. They have some things that simply don't make sense to move into an Azure context or Azure Stack may be too much for a small project, and it lets them take more traditional HCI that they might be comfortable with and get it with Windows Server.
So it's basically deploying VMs for you.
Yeah, it's the major workload is VMs. Although we can just act as a file server as well.
Oh,
very,
really?
very high performance scale out file server. I mean, crazy high performance.
So what would be the recommended solutions or applications to run on WSSD? Or are we?
We're general, right? Because
Okay.
it's hyperconverged, anything that you can put in a VM, you can run on top of WSSD. The file server is really about allowing for disaggregated solutions as well. So you can, if your environment, say, is truly enormous, you can build a very large, high-performance file store and then run Hyper-V clusters separately that will consume, they'll run their VMs off of that file server. So it's both HCI and disaggregated, depending on the deployment model that you want to choose.
Okay, let's talk about deployment models, because our off-screen conversation about this, there's some hardware configurations that need to be, I guess, thought about and prepared before you actually run out and say, I want to go download and install this.
Yep.
Can customers just go and download this, or are you recommending a specific prescriptive?
So because it's in Windows Data Center, technically anyone can go and run these capabilities on the hardware that they have lying around. The problem is, like I said, you probably won't be successful, right? Because we run ultra high performance, ultra low latency. We store multiple copies of data across your cluster. To get good, reliable, scalable performance, random hardware won't do it. We know this from experience. We know this from support calls. So we kind of take a two-prong approach to making the hardware work for the customer. We have additional tests that we require hardware makers for critical pieces of the hardware to work, like network adapters, disks, HBAs. They have to do additional testing, and they get a special logo qualifier in the Windows Server catalog. And then when I work with the OEMs, they go and they put together a bill of materials that they think will work. They will test on their own, and then they run additional tests that we specify as part of WSSD and submit those. And if they can clear all those hurdles, we feel very confident that customers will be successful in that configuration. So it takes the guesswork out of it for a customer when they buy a WSSD configuration. They just get what they want within those defined parameters, and both the OEM, Microsoft, and the customer can feel good that it's going to work the way they want it to.
How much tinkering are customers allowed when they do buy a pre-configured or a pre-built?
We don't actually lock anything down. It's just Windows Server at the end of the day.
So they're able to basically be the admin on the box without being locked out.
It's full control. Once it's delivered to their site, you can treat it like any other Windows Server that's running a critical application, right? You don't want to run Minesweeper on it, but
why not? Right?
It's not. You're not locked out of the infrastructure in the same way that you would be with, say, something like Azure Stack, where they want to very tightly control it to ensure that uptime. This is just about pre-selecting and pre-configuring the pieces that are most commonly gotten wrong by customers who doesn't have the experience, and giving it to them and saying, we know this is going to work if you run it this way, but it's yours now.
And it runs server core?
It can run either way. We would recommend server core, but this also works with the full GUI if you really want to.
Is there a difference between the two in terms of performance if you are running server core or the full GUI?
Realistically, not really. There's a little bit of extra RAM that gets used in the management partition of the for the hypervisor management partition, but it's a tiny bit. So it's really customer choice at the end of the day.
Let's talk about the networking, because with HCI, obviously networking is very important. Is the standard recommended as 10G, 25G? Are we looking at 100G?
10G is actually our minimum requirement. You can't actually certify a solution with 1G in our catalog. The standard you'll see from the vendors that have certified, they've all certified with at minimum 10G RDMA, because RDMA is how you get the most out of Microsoft's HCI stack. And then I'm strongly encouraging the vendors going forward as they develop new solutions to standardize on 25G. It's just a better experience. You're less likely to hit a cap as you add nodes to increase your HCI capacity. So 25G is pretty much the standard now for all of the new configurations. And then we can go up to 100G. I mean, if you've seen some of the sessions we've done on our HCI and software-defined stack this week, we can do impressive things with performance. We can choke out multiple 100-gig adapters, no sweat, and leave CPU room to breathe.
What's the recommended deployment, I guess, configuration to start with? 2 nodes, 3 nodes, 4 nodes? Because I know certain vendors out there have a recommended configuration to start out with 4 nodes.
I would say it's workload dependent. We don't actually recommend. We do see that a lot of the new adoption over the last year has been in the 2-node space. 2 nodes is really where customers are asking for cheap, reliable, highly available hardware that doesn't require a SAS JBOD and all the fiddliness that can go with some of those smaller configs. So those are becoming very popular. But if you look at our deployments, 4-node is about the sweet spot of what customers ask for. We do know that we have a number of customers who go all the way up to 16 nodes and are being very successful with it. I can't talk about them, but they're doing some really amazing stuff all the way up at that scale. So we don't make a hard recommendation. But in recognition of how important that 2-node is, we did make a lot of changes for Server 2019 to make 2-node even more compelling. So we have things like double mirroring, where we can make a 2-node configuration that can both survive an entire node failure as well as disk failures on the surviving node without any loss of availability. So we can make a 2-node system incredibly resilient to failure, and it's something customers have been really excited for.
So one last question.
Yeah.
Enterprises have multiple data centers. Does this scale for multiple data centers, and how does that work? Without going too deep.
You mean like stretch clustering?
Yes.
So we don't actually support stretch clustering right now. It is probably one of our most requested features to add to storage spaces direct in particular. So I know the engineering teams are investigating it seriously because it is a high customer demand. But right now we kind of want it to stay within one data center because the most important thing from our perspective is data integrity and keeping the workloads running. So latency is the enemy in those scenarios. So when we do stretch clustering, if we ever do it, we're going to make sure it's done right and it doesn't impact the availability of the solution.
On a final note, any sessions that you want to recommend to our attendees to learn more?
I believe there is a session going on right now by Cosmos Darwin about S2D. There was also everything you need to know to be successful with HCI by Eldon Christensen and Stephen Ekron yesterday. So if you are looking to get started on the Microsoft HCI stack and you want to know how we built all of our recommendations and the stuff we tell our OEM partners, go watch the recording of that session. That is from the ground up. We assume you already know what HCI is, but that's from the ground up, like how you build a successful IT practice around HCI.
Well, thank you, Carmen. We are out of time. Thank you, everybody, for watching. This is Channel 9 Live here at Microsoft Night. Stay tuned for more.